The massive space station called Harmony Prime floated in the darkness between stars. It was huge, bigger than most cities on Earth. Lights twinkled across its surface like stars, and ships from dozens of different worlds came and went from its many docking bays. Inside the station's main meeting hall, representatives from 43 different alien species sat around a circular table that seemed to go on forever. The hall was designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes. Some aliens breathed different gases, so they sat in special bubbles. Others needed different gravity, so their sections of the floor could adjust. The lighting changed colors in different areas to help various species see better. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the human section, wearing his best blue uniform with the Earth insignia on his shoulder. Next to him, Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez checked her tablet computer one more time. They had been part of the Galactic Cooperative for only 2 years, making humanity the newest members of this ancient alliance. Jake looked around the room with wonder that he still felt after dozens of these meetings. The Zilithians looked like tall, gray-skinned humans, but with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. They were known as the wisest species in the galaxy, having studied science for over 50,000 years. The Nexari resembled giant praying mantises, but with beautiful, colorful wings that folded behind their backs. They were the galaxy's greatest scholars and kept all the important records. The most impressive were the Cleth, who looked like walking trees with dozens of thin branches for arms. But the strangest of all was the hive queen Zeskluk. She appeared to be a single creature, but Jake knew she was actually billions of tiny insects working together as one mind. Her voice came from a speaker device since her real voice was too high-pitched for most species to hear. Ambassador Crixvol of the Zilithians stood up to speak. His 4 eyes focused on different parts of the room as he talked, a habit that had taken Jake months to get used to. When Crixvol spoke, everyone listened. His species had been exploring space when Earth was still covered in dinosaurs. Fellow members of the cooperative, Crixvol began, his voice deep and smooth. Today we discuss the theoretical problem of faster-than-light communication without quantum entanglement. Jake perked up. This was the kind of technology that could change everything. Right now, it took years for messages to travel between distant star systems. Ships had to carry information by hand, which meant that by the time you got news from across the galaxy, it might be decades old. Crixvol activated a holographic display that showed complex mathematical equations floating in the air above the table. The symbols looked nothing like human mathematics, but Lisa's tablet automatically translated them into form she could understand. As you can see, Crixvol continued, the fundamental laws of physics make this impossible. Information cannot travel faster than light through normal space. Quantum entanglement allows instant communication, but only between particles that have been specially prepared together. Creating new quantum pairs across vast distances would still require slower than light travel. The other aliens nodded. Their various heads made clicking sounds of agreement or flashed different colored lights depending on how their species showed approval. This was clearly old news to them. Ambassador Veltar of the Nexari species raised one of her long, thin arms. The Nexari archives contain over 10,000 years of research on this problem, she said in her musical voice. Every mathematical approach has been tried. Every theoretical framework has been explored. The conclusion is always the same. Hive Queen Zeskluk's speaker crackled to life. The collective intelligence of my species represents billions of individual minds working as one. We have calculated every possible solution. The problem is mathematically impossible. Jake glanced at Lisa, who was taking notes on her tablet. Her fingers moved quickly as she recorded the alien equations and theories. Jake had learned to trust Lisa's instincts about technical problems. She had a way of looking at challenges that often surprised him. The laws of physics are not suggestions, added Captain Mortek of the warlike Dreknari species. His lizard-like face showed something that might have been amusement. They are absolute limits that cannot be broken. Jake raised his hand slowly. The room grew quiet as the aliens turned their attention to him. He still felt nervous, speaking in front of beings who had been traveling between stars since before humans invented writing. What if there's an approach that hasn't been tried yet? Jake asked. Maybe humans could look at the problem from a different angle. The silence that followed was not comfortable. Then, slowly, sounds began to fill the room. The Zilithians made a low humming noise that Jake had learned was their version of laughter. The Nexari clicked their mandibles together rapidly. Even the dignified Cleth rustled their branch-like arms in what passed for amusement among their kind. Ambassador Crixvol's 4 eyes all focused on Jake at once. "Captain Morrison," he said, and Jake could hear the condescending tone even through the translation. "Your species has been capable of interstellar travel for less than 50 years. The civilizations in this room have been studying advanced physics for thousands of centuries. The Nexari have detailed records of every failed attempt," added Veltar, her musical voice somehow managing to sound patronizing. "We have mathematical proofs that date back to before your planet had complex life forms," Hive Queen Zis KLK spoke. Through her translator, "The combined intelligence of trillions of minds across dozens of species has examined this problem. Perhaps humans should focus on more achievable goals." Jake felt his face flush red, but he kept his voice calm. He had been a military officer long enough to recognize when someone was talking down to him. "I understand that you've all studied this for a long time," he said, "but sometimes a fresh perspective can help." Captain Mortek leaned forward, his reptilian eyes glittering. "Captain Morrison, this is not a matter of perspective, this is a matter of fundamental physical law. Your species cannot simply ignore the basic structure of reality because you wish things were different." Lisa looked up from her tablet. "Captain," she said quietly, "I'm recording everything they're saying. Their mathematical models, their assumptions, all of it." Jake nodded slightly. Around the table, the aliens were already moving on to other topics. The faster-than-light communication problem was, in their minds, settled forever. It was impossible, and that was that. But Jake had spent enough time around humans to know something about his species that these aliens clearly didn't understand. Humans had a very special relationship with the word impossible. Throughout their history, humans had been told that heavier-than-air flight was impossible, that traveling faster than sound was impossible, that going to the moon was impossible, that computers small enough to fit in your pocket were impossible. The meeting continued for another hour, covering routine matters of trade and exploration. Jake participated when necessary, but his mind kept returning to the dismissive way the aliens had laughed at his suggestion. They hadn't just said no. They had laughed. They had treated him like a child who didn't understand how the world worked. When the meeting finally ended, the various alien representatives filed out of the hall, chatting among themselves about practical matters. Jake heard fragments of conversation about mining rights and shipping schedules. The impossible communication problem was already forgotten. Jake stood up slowly and straightened his uniform. "Lisa," he said quietly, "please make sure you have copies of everything they presented today." "Already done, Captain," she replied, holding up her tablet. "I've got their mathematical proofs, their physical assumptions, and detailed notes on why they think it's impossible." "Good," Jake said, watching the last of the aliens leave the meeting hall. "Because I think we just got ourselves a new project," Lisa grinned. She had worked with humans long enough to recognize that particular tone in Jake's voice. It was the same tone human engineers got when someone told them a bridge couldn't be built, or when someone said a mountain couldn't be climbed, or when someone declared that a problem couldn't be solved. It was the tone that meant someone was about to prove the experts wrong. The video message from Captain Jake Morrison reached Earth 3 days later. The recording traveled through the normal communication networks that connected human colonies across dozens of star systems. Jake's report about the Galactic Council meeting was meant for the Earth Science Directorate, but somehow it ended up on the public internet. Within 6 hours, the video had been viewed 50 million times. Dr. Amanda Foster was eating lunch in her office at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology when her research assistant burst through the door. "Dr. Foster, you need to see this right now," the young man said, holding up his tablet computer. Amanda wiped her hands and took the device. On the screen, Captain Morrison was explaining how the alien civilizations had laughed at the idea that humans might solve faster-than-light communication. The recording showed the mathematical proofs the aliens had presented, all the reasons why the problem was impossible. They said it can't be done. Jake's voice came from the tablet speaker. They said our species should focus on more achievable goals. Amanda felt something familiar stirring in her chest. It was the same feeling she had gotten in graduate school when her professor said women weren't suited for theoretical physics. The same feeling she had experienced when the University Review Board said her research was too risky and unconventional. She replayed the alien mathematical proofs, studying each equation carefully. "Kevin," she called to her research partner, in the next office. "Come look at this." Dr. Kevin Chen hurried over, still holding his coffee mug. He watched the video over Amanda's shoulder, his eyebrows rising higher with each alien explanation. "They're thinking about this completely wrong," Amanda said when the video ended. "What do you mean?" Kevin asked, setting down his coffee and pulling up a chair. Amanda grabbed a marker and walked to the whiteboard that covered one entire wall of her office. "They're treating this like a communication problem. But what if it's actually a perception problem?" She began drawing diagrams on the board. "Look, they're trying to send information from point A to point B faster than light can travel. But what if the information doesn't need to travel at all?" Kevin stared at the diagrams. "You mean if the information already exists in both places?" "Exactly." Amanda's marker squeaked across the board as she added more equations. "What if instead of sending a message, we create a situation where the same information exists in multiple locations simultaneously?" Across the country in Detroit, Michigan, a very different conversation was taking place. Danny Williams sat in his garage, surrounded by old car parts and electronic equipment. His 12-year-old daughter Emma sat on a workbench nearby, reading from a printout of the alien equations. "Dad, these alien guys are saying that information can't move faster than light through space," Emma explained, her legs swinging back and forth. Danny nodded slowly. He didn't understand the complex mathematics, but he understood the basic idea. He had spent 20 years fixing cars and building custom electronics. Sometimes the best solutions came from thinking about problems in simple terms. "But what if it doesn't move through space at all?" Danny said, picking up a wrench and turning it over in his hands. Emma looked up from the papers. "What do you mean?" "Well, when I tune a car radio, I'm not sending the radio waves from the station to the car. The waves are already everywhere. The radio just picks up what's already there." Danny walked over to his workbench and picked up an old radio. "What if space is like that? What if information is already everywhere and we just need to build the right kind of receiver?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Like tuning into a frequency that already exists?" "Something like that." Danny looked at the pile of electronic parts on his workbench. "Your old computer has some quantum processing chips, right? The ones they use for encryption?" Within hours, similar conversations were happening in laboratories, universities, coffee shops, and homes around the world. The alien dismissal had done something they never intended. It had focused human creativity on a single problem with the added motivation of proving someone wrong. Dr. Sarah Kim at Stanford University approached the problem from the angle of quantum mechanics. She thought about how quantum particles could exist in multiple states at the same time until someone observed them. What if information could work the same way? At a high school in Phoenix, Arizona, 16-year-old Maria Santos showed the alien video to her physics teacher, Mr. Pete Anderson. "This is just like that video game problem I solved last year," Maria said. "Instead of moving the character from one place to another, I duplicated the character so it existed in both places at once." Mr. Anderson raised an eyebrow. "You think space-time works like a video game?" "Why not?" Maria shrugged. "The aliens are thinking about it like it's some ancient library where you have to walk from shelf to shelf. But what if it's more like the internet, where information can exist in multiple servers at the same time?" Online forums exploded with discussions. Professional scientists debated theories with garage inventors. High school students shared ideas with retired engineers. The internet became a massive collaboration platform where thousands of humans worked on the same impossible problem. A week after Jake's video went public, Dr. Amanda Foster published a research paper called Quantum Mirror Theory. Her idea, was that information didn't need to travel if it already existed in multiple locations simultaneously. She proposed creating a network of quantum observers that would allow information to exist everywhere at once, until someone chose to look at it in a specific place. The Human Space Development Corporation read her paper and immediately offered funding for her research. Meanwhile, Danny Williams had built something in his garage that he called a quantum echo chamber. It was made from car parts, old computer chips, and electronics he had ordered online. According to every known law of physics, it shouldn't work. But when he tested it, something happened that he couldn't explain. The device seemed to make the air in his garage vibrate in impossible ways. When he attached it to his computer and sent a signal to one side of the device, the same signal appeared on the other side instantly. Not after a few milliseconds, not after the time light would take to travel that distance. Instantly, Danny called his daughter over to see the results. "Emma, I think we broke physics." Emma looked at the readings on the computer screen. Or maybe physics was never as solid as everyone thought. Back on Harmony Prime, Captain Jake Morrison was receiving daily reports from Earth. The number of humans working on the faster-than-light communication problem was growing exponentially. Major universities had redirected entire departments to study the challenge. Technology companies were investing billions of dollars in research. Even amateur inventors in their garages were making progress that surprised professional scientists. Jake scheduled another meeting with Ambassador Crix Vol. The Zilithian representative agreed to see him, probably out of curiosity more than anything else. "Ambassador," Jake said when they met in one of the station's diplomatic meeting rooms, "I wanted to inform you that humanity has decided to pursue the faster-than-light communication project." Crix Vol's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which Jake had learned was a sign of confusion among his species. "Captain Morrison, we explained to you why this is impossible. Your species cannot simply ignore the fundamental laws of physics." Jake smiled, the same kind of smile that had gotten him into trouble throughout his military career. "With respect, Ambassador, you explained why it's impossible according to your understanding of physics. But humans have learned that understanding can change." "The laws of physics are not subject to opinion," Crix Vol replied stiffly. "Maybe not," Jake agreed. "But our understanding of those laws certainly is. Ambassador, humans have a saying. The difficult we do immediately. The impossible takes a little longer." Crix Vol stared at him with all 4 eyes. "Captain Morrison, your species has been in space for less than a century. Some of the civilizations in the Galactic Council have been studying advanced physics since before your planet had multicellular life." Jake nodded politely. "That's true. But sometimes being new to a problem is an advantage. We don't know what's supposed to be impossible." The ambassador's expression, as much as Jake could read Zilithian expressions, suggested he thought humans were naive children playing with forces beyond their understanding. Jake didn't mind. Throughout human history, experts had said the same thing about every major breakthrough his species had ever achieved. This time would be no different. He just hoped Earth scientists and inventors would prove him right before the aliens' patience ran out. 6 months after the Galactic Council meeting, something impossible happened on Earth. It happened not once but 3 times, in 3 different places, all within the same hour. In her laboratory at MIT, Dr. Amanda Foster stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The quantum mirror array she had built was working. The device looked like a collection of metal boxes connected by fiber optic cables, nothing that seemed particularly impressive. But the readings on her screen showed that information was traveling instantly between Boston and Geneva, Switzerland. "Kevin, come here right now," she called to her research partner. Kevin Chen rushed over from his workstation. "What is it?" "We just sent a message to the European Research Facility in Geneva. It arrived before I finished typing it." Kevin looked at the timestamp data. "That's not possible. Even light takes several milliseconds to travel that distance." Amanda grinned. "Apparently, our quantum observers don't care about what's possible." Her breakthrough had come from thinking about quantum particles in a new way. Instead of trying to send information from one place to another, she had created a network of quantum observers that existed in a state of permanent non-observation. The information existed everywhere in the network at once, until someone chose to look at it in a specific location. At the same time, halfway across the world in Detroit, Danny Williams was having his own impossible moment. His garage workshop looked like a tornado had hit an electronics store. Cables ran everywhere, connecting devices that had no business working together. In the center of it all sat his quantum echo chamber, humming quietly. "Emma, come look at this," Danny called to his daughter, who was doing homework at a card table in the corner of the garage. 12-year-old Emma walked over and looked at the computer screen. "What am I looking at, Dad?" "I just sent a message. To that inventor guy in Tokyo. Remember Mr. Tanaka, the one we've been working with online?" Danny pointed at the screen. "The message just appeared on his computer instantly." Emma frowned. "How instantly?" "As in, the same moment I hit send. Not a few seconds later, not even a few milliseconds later. The exact same instant." Danny's approach had been completely different from Dr. Foster's academic method. Working with spare car parts and his intuition about mechanical systems, he had built a device that made space itself vibrate at specific frequencies. The vibrations carried information through what he called dimensional harmonics, though he admitted he didn't really understand how it worked. "It's like tuning a guitar," he had explained to Emma weeks earlier. "When you pluck one string, sometimes other strings start vibrating too, even if you don't touch them. Space might work the same way. But perhaps the most surprising success happened at Desert Sky High School in Phoenix, Arizona. Maria Santos and her physics class had been working on their project for months, treating it like an elaborate video game puzzle. "Mr. Anderson, it worked," Maria shouted across the classroom. "Pete," Anderson looked up from grading papers. "What worked?" "Our quantum duplication array. We just sent a message to our sister school in Mumbai, India. They confirmed they received it instantly. The high school team had approached the problem through gaming theory. Maria had convinced her classmates that space-time was like a multiplayer online game where information could be copied, rather than moved. They had built their device using computer gaming equipment, treating quantum particles like game characters that could exist in multiple locations simultaneously. "How can you be sure it worked?" Mr. Anderson asked, walking over to examine their setup. 16-year-old Carlos Martinez, Maria's lab partner, pointed at their computer screen. "We sent them the message, 'Hello from Phoenix,' and asked them to reply with the current time in Mumbai. Look at the timestamps." Mr. Anderson studied the data. The reply from Mumbai had arrived at exactly the same moment the message was sent from Phoenix. According to the laws of physics, that should have been impossible. "Are you sure your clocks are synchronized?" he asked. "We triple-checked," Maria replied. "We're using atomic clock synchronization over the internet. The message didn't travel from here to there. It just appeared there at the same time it existed here." Within hours, all three teams were in contact with each other, sharing their results and trying to understand how three completely different approaches had solved the same impossible problem. Dr. Foster's quantum observer network, Danny's dimensional harmonic resonator, and Maria's quantum duplication array all worked, but they worked in completely different ways. Captain Jake Morrison received the reports aboard Harmony Prime with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He knew that proving the success to the Galactic Council would be the real challenge. Aliens who had studied physics for thousands of years would not easily accept that humans had achieved the impossible in just 6 months. He scheduled an emergency session with the Council, claiming he had important news about human research projects. Ambassador Crixvoll agreed to attend, probably expecting to hear about some minor human achievement that paled in comparison to real galactic science. The council meeting room filled quickly as word spread that the humans had requested an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered, curious about what the newest members of the Galactic Cooperative could possibly have discovered that warranted interrupting their regular schedule. Jake stood before the assembled aliens, feeling more nervous than he had during his first space combat mission. "Members of the Council," he began. 6 months ago, you informed humanity that faster-than-light communication was theoretically impossible." Ambassador Crixvoll's 4 eyes focused on Jake. "Yes, and we provided mathematical proof of that impossibility. I trust your species has moved on to more practical research projects." Actually, Jake replied, we've solved it. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the station's life support systems humming in the background. Then, slowly, sounds began to fill the room. Not laughter this time, but confused chittering, clicking, and the various alien equivalents of, what did he just say? Captain Morrison, Ambassador Veltar of the Nexari said carefully, did you just claim that humans have achieved faster-than-light communication? I did. Hive Queen Zezis Kalke's translator crackled to life. That is mathematically impossible. Our collective intelligence has verified this across billions of calculations. Jake nodded to Lisa Rodriguez, who had been standing quietly beside him. She activated a portable device that looked like nothing more than a metal box with some blinking lights. It was hastily assembled from components available aboard Harmony Prime, built according to specifications transmitted from Earth. This device is currently receiving signals from Earth, Lisa announced. Earth is 12 light-years away. Light-speed communication would take 12 years each way. Quantum entanglement communication requires specially prepared particle pairs, which we do not have. She looked at her handheld display. I'm about to receive a message that was sent from Earth 30 seconds ago. The device beeped softly. Text appeared on Lisa's display and she read it aloud. Greetings, Galactic Council. This message was sent from Earth at exactly 14:32:17 Universal Standard Time. We hope you're having a pleasant day. Sincerely, the supposedly impossible humans. Lisa looked up at the stunned aliens. The current time is 14:32:47. This message traveled 12 light-years in 30 seconds. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Aliens were shouting in dozens of languages, their translators struggling to keep up. Mathematical impossibility was sitting before them, working perfectly and apparently powered by human stubbornness. Ambassador Creeks Vol stood slowly, all four of his eyes fixed on the innocent-looking device. How? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake smiled the same smile that had annoyed authority figures throughout his military career. We approached the problem differently, Ambassador. You saw limitations where we saw challenges. You saw laws where we saw suggestions. Captain Mortek of the Draknari leaned forward, his reptilian features twisted in confusion. Your species has somehow bypassed fundamental physical laws? No, Lisa replied, checking her device as another message arrived from Earth. We just discovered that what you thought were laws were actually more like guidelines. The universe is apparently much more flexible than any of us realized. The message from Earth was simple, but unmistakably human in its tone. P.S. We told you we could do it. Love planet Earth. Jake looked around the room at aliens whose civilizations were older than human written history, all staring in amazement at a technology they had declared impossible. As I mentioned before, Ambassador Grixval, humans have never been very good at accepting no for an answer. The news spread through the galaxy faster than anything had ever traveled before, which was saying something since the galaxy now had 3 different types of faster-than-light communication. Within days of the Harmony Prime demonstration, every major alien civilization had sent delegations to Earth to study what humans had accomplished. Dr. Rachel Kim, a theoretical physicist who had been quietly working on quantum mechanics at Berkeley, suddenly found herself appointed as Earth's director of Galactic Scientific Exchange. Her first day on the job involved hosting the most distinguished alien scientists in the galaxy, beings whose species had been studying advanced physics since before Earth had an atmosphere. The Zilithian delegation arrived first, their entire scientific council traveling from their homeworld for the first time in over a century. Ambassador Crix Vol led the group, but even he seemed humbled by the situation. Dr. Kim, Crix Vol said as his delegation gathered in the conference room, our species wishes to formally request permission to study your faster-than-light communication methods. We may have been too hasty in our previous conclusions. Rachel nodded politely. Of course, Ambassador, but I should warn you, our research methods might seem unusual compared to what you're used to. She had no idea how much of an understatement that was. The first stop on the Zilithian tour was Danny Williams's garage in Detroit. When the alien scientists saw the workshop, They stood in stunned silence. The place looked like organized chaos. Electronic parts covered every surface. Cables ran across the floor in patterns that seemed to follow no logical design. The quantum echo chamber sat in the center of it all, held together with electrical tape and powered by what appeared to be a modified car battery. This configuration should create a cascade failure, the lead Zilithian scientist observed, pointing at Danny's device with one of his long, gray fingers. Danny looked up from where he was adjusting a connection with a pair of pliers. "Oh, it does that sometimes," he said cheerfully. "That's actually how I figured out the harmonic frequency for dimensional shifting. The failures taught me more than the successes." The Zilithians exchanged glances with all four of their eyes. Their research methods had been refined over 50,000 years. Every experiment was planned in detail. Every variable was controlled. Every possible failure was prevented before it could happen. The idea of learning from failures was completely foreign to them. "You allow your experiments to fail?" asked another Zilithian scientist. "Sure," Danny replied, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. "Sometimes the best discoveries happen when things go wrong in interesting ways. I probably failed 1,000 times before I got this thing working." Danny demonstrated his device, sending instant messages to researchers in Tokyo, London, and Sydney. The Zilithians took careful notes, but Rachel could see they were struggling to understand not just how the technology worked, but how Danny's approach to research could possibly be effective. The next stop was MIT, where Dr. Amanda Foster showed the Nexari delegation her quantum observer network. The scholarly aliens were fascinated by the technology, but baffled by her mathematical approach. Dr. Foster, the lead Nexari researcher, said, her musical voice carrying a note of confusion, "Your equations contain variables for unknown quantities. How can you solve problems when you don't know all the values?" Amanda laughed. "That's exactly the point. We don't try to know everything before we start. We let the universe fill in the blanks as we go along." She pulled up her research notes on the laboratory's main display. The equations were filled with terms marked as unknown, or to be determined by observation. The Nexari method requires complete theoretical frameworks before any practical work begins, the researcher explained. We must understand every aspect of a problem before we attempt to solve it. "But what if understanding comes from doing?" Amanda asked. "What if the only way to know some things is to try them and see what happens?" The concept was revolutionary to the Nexari. Their entire civilization was built on the idea that knowledge came before action. They studied problems for decades or centuries before attempting solutions. The idea of learning through experimentation rather than pure calculation was completely alien to them. The most surprising visit came when Hive Queen Ziskalk personally traveled to Phoenix to observe Maria Santos and her high school physics class. The Queen was used to the collective intelligence of billions of minds working in perfect harmony. She watched 17 teenagers argue loudly about theoretical physics while building impossible devices with gaming equipment. "Your research methodology appears highly inefficient," the Queen observed to Mr. Pete Anderson. "Multiple minds pursuing contradictory approaches simultaneously." Pete Anderson watched his students debate whether quantum particles had consciousness or if consciousness created quantum effects. Half the class was arguing that space-time worked like a video game, while the other half insisted it was more like a social media network where information could be shared instantly across vast distances. "That's exactly why it works, Your Majesty," Pete replied. "They're not trying to reach consensus. They're trying to be right. And sometimes being wrong in an interesting way leads to being right in an unexpected way." The Queen's translator struggled with the concept. Hive minds didn't experience disagreement or competing ideas. Every thought was shared instantly across billions of individuals. The notion that conflict and argument might actually generate innovation was completely foreign to her experience. "You allow your young to develop incorrect theories?" the Queen asked. "We encourage them to," Pete said with a grin. "Because sometimes the incorrect theories lead to correct solutions that nobody expected." As the weeks passed, something unprecedented began happening throughout the galaxy. Alien civilizations started adopting human research methods. Zilithian scientists began allowing their experiments to fail on purpose. Nexari researchers started working with undefined variables and incomplete information. The Hive Queen authorized individual drones to pursue different theories simultaneously, even if those theories contradicted each other. The results were immediate and dramatic. The Zilithians developed a working matter transportation system within a month by embracing what they called failure-based learning. Their teleporter worked by making mistakes in such a specific way that objects ended up where they were supposed to be instead of where physics said they should be. The Nexari created universal translators that functioned by accepting incomplete information and adapting in real time. Instead of trying to understand every possible language before starting, their devices learned new languages by making translation mistakes and correcting them on the fly. Most remarkably, the Hive Queen's individual drones began creating art and poetry for the first time in their species' history. When billions of minds weren't perfectly synchronized, individual creativity emerged. Their collective efficiency decreased slightly, but their innovation increased exponentially. Captain Jake Morrison received daily reports from across the galaxy. Problems that had remained unsolved for centuries were yielding to new approaches inspired by human, illogical thinking. The impossible was becoming routine. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. A joint team of human and alien researchers, working together using the new hybrid methodology, announced they had solved faster-than-light travel itself, not through building better engines or finding new energy sources, but by convincing space that their ship was already at its destination. The universe, it seemed, was much more gullible than anyone had realized. Dr. Rachel Kim stood in her office, looking at reports from research teams across the galaxy. Aliens and humans were working together, tackling problems that had been dismissed as impossible for thousands of years. She smiled as she read the latest message from the Joint Research Station near Alpha Centauri. Today, we convinced time to run backwards for 30 seconds. The temporal mechanics team says this should be impossible, but we did it anyway. Tomorrow, we're going to try convincing gravity to work sideways. The universe seems to enjoy being surprised. Rachel shook her head in amazement. Humans had always been good at breaking rules. Now they were teaching the entire galaxy how to do it. 1 year after the Galactic Council's dismissal of faster-than-light communication, Harmony Prime hosted the first Galactic Innovation Summit. The massive space station had been expanded 3 times to accommodate representatives from every known civilization in the galaxy, plus the hundreds of human inventors, scientists, and garage tinkerers whose impossible thinking had changed everything. Admiral Jake Morrison, promoted from captain and now serving as humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Cooperative, stood at the podium in the main auditorium. Behind him, a holographic display showed dozens of technologies that had been considered impossible just 12 months earlier. The audience was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dignified Zilithian scholars sat next to human teenagers. Ancient Nexari researchers shared notes with mechanics from Detroit. The Hive Queen's individual drones, now capable of independent thought, chatted excitedly with alien scientists who had learned to embrace failure as a teaching tool. Friends and colleagues, Jake began, looking out at the diverse crowd. A year ago, many of you told humanity that faster-than-light communication was impossible. You were right, according to everything we knew at the time. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. The aliens had learned to appreciate human humor, especially when it was directed at their own previous assumptions. But humans have a unique relationship with impossibility, Jake continued. When someone tells us something can't be done, we don't hear a statement of fact. We hear a personal challenge. Ambassador Crixvol stood up from his seat in the front. Over the past year, his entire worldview had transformed. His species had achieved more scientific breakthroughs in 12 months than in the previous 1,000 years, all by adopting human approaches to problem-solving. Admiral Morrison, Crixvol said, his 4 eyes focusing on Jake with respect rather than condescension. If I may interrupt, the Zilithian Council wishes to formally apologize for our previous attitude. We have learned that when humans are told something cannot be done, they do not hear limitation. They hear invitation. The IA audience applauded, a sound that would have been impossible in the previous year's rigidly formal council meetings. Aliens had learned to express enthusiasm and approval in ways that transcended their species' traditional behaviors. Dr. Amanda Foster, now director of the Galactic Institute for Impossible Research, took the stage next. "This year's achievements speak for themselves," she said, gesturing to the holographic display. "Instantaneous matter transportation, universal translation that works by guessing, gravity manipulation through polite conversation with space-time, and yes, faster than light travel by convincing the universe that distance is just a suggestion." She paused as the audience chuckled. "But perhaps our greatest achievement is teaching each other that the impossible is just another word for untried." In the back of the auditorium, Danny Williams sat with his daughter Emma, now 13 and serving as his official research assistant. Danny was wearing his best flannel shirt for the formal occasion, though he had refused to wear a tie. He stood up when Amanda called his name. "Danny Williams revolutionized our understanding of dimensional mechanics," Amanda announced, "by treating the universe like a car engine that just needed the right tuning." Danny walked to the stage carrying a device no bigger than a smartphone. "This here's our latest project," he said, holding up the small device. "Portable time viewer. Lets you see backwards or forwards about 10 minutes. The alien mathematicians say it violates causality and should destroy the universe." Ambassador Veltar of the Nixari called out from the audience. "Our calculations indicate that temporal observation should create paradoxes that unravel reality itself." Danny grinned. "Good thing the universe doesn't read math papers." He activated the device. The holographic display above the stage showed the auditorium exactly as it would appear in 10 minutes. In the image, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding enthusiastically. Danny looked at the image, then at the audience. "Looks like you're all going to like whatever happens next." Maria Santos, now 17 and already accepted to multiple universities for quantum physics programs, joined Danny on the stage. "Our team has been working on something even more impossible," she announced. Mr. Pete Anderson, her former high school physics teacher, and now her research partner, activated another device. "We've solved the ultimate impossibility," he said. "Universal peace." The audience fell silent. Even by the new standards of impossible achievements, this seemed beyond belief. "Every expert said it couldn't be done," Maria continued. "Too many different species, too many conflicting interests, too much history of competition and conflict." Pete smiled. "But we applied human problem-solving methods. Instead of trying to eliminate conflict, we made it productive. Instead of forcing agreement, we encouraged creative disagreement." The display showed footage from research stations across the galaxy where aliens and humans worked together, arguing passionately about theoretical problems while collaborating on practical solutions. Zilithians and Nexari debated quantum mechanics while building impossible devices together. Hive Queen drones pursued individual theories while still contributing to collective goals. "Conflict doesn't have to mean war," Maria explained. "It can mean innovation. Competition doesn't have to mean destruction. It can mean progress." Hive Queen Zis Kalke rose from her section of the auditorium. "The human approach has taught us that individual thought enhances rather than threatens collective wisdom. Our species has achieved greater innovation through disagreement than we ever did through consensus." Jake returned to the podium for his closing remarks. "Queen Zittersklok asks what humanity will attempt next. The truth is, we're never short of impossible challenges." He looked out at the audience of beings from across the galaxy, species that had existed for millennia before humans learned to make fire, now eagerly awaiting humanity's next impossible project. "Right now we're working on something our experts say is absolutely impossible," Jake said with a smile that had become famous throughout the galaxy. "We're trying to convince entropy to run backwards. We want to make the universe younger instead of older." He paused for effect, watching the aliens lean forward in anticipation. "The thermodynamics experts say it violates the second law of physics and would require infinite energy. The cosmologists say it would unravel the fabric of reality itself." Jake's smile widened. "Which, as you've all learned, just means we haven't tried hard enough yet." The audience erupted in applause, exactly as the time viewer had predicted 10 minutes earlier. But unlike the prediction, The applause continued for much longer as representatives from dozens of species rose to their feet in appreciation. A new sign had been installed in the Galactic Council chambers, written in hundreds of languages and scripts. Just because something is impossible doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means you haven't asked a human to try it yet. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson about Deathworlders. Never tell them they can't do something because they'll take it as a personal invitation to prove you wrong. And somehow, impossibly, they usually succeeded. As the summit ended and beings from across the galaxy prepared to return to their homeworlds, they carried with them a new understanding. The universe was far more flexible than anyone had realized. Reality was much more willing to negotiate than previous generations had believed. And sometimes, the best way to solve an impossible problem was to ignore the fact that it was impossible and try it anyway. The humans had taught them that the word impossible was really just another way of saying, no one has been stubborn enough to try this yet.